about. Today's program is about Bethlehem and about King David, and we're really going to take a look at the city as it is a very special time there today, and talk about that. And our guest today is Hannah Bendikowski. Hannah is a tour guide, but she really is a much more than she's one of the leading educators here in Jewish Christian relations. She works at the Rossing Center for dialogue, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. But she's truly a top expert here in Israel when it comes to Jewish Christian relations, and also Christians in general, the population here, the demographics, and the inner and really going deep into the tension. So we've had her on a number of times on a number of different topics, and I think today's topic will be fascinating. So Hannah, thank you for joining us today, and Judith, also thank you very much for trying us out.
Okay,
Yes, I'm going to make you host, Hannah. Sorry, and
so I'll be able to share my presentation.
Yeah, spotlight, and here we go.
Am I the only person watching this?
So far, yeah. Maybe a couple of the other ones will join on, but we have a private tour today. So if you have questions,
and it's recorded, so maybe people will watch it later. So yeah, I would do that as a lecture. So don't worry, I'm not going to ask you too many questions along the way. Okay, so good morning. My name is Hannah Bendikowski. Thank you very much, Elisa, for inviting me again to give a presentation. I'm working for the Rossing Center for Education and Dialogue. I'm responsible for a project called the Jerusalem Center for Jewish Christian Relations, and I am specialized in the Christian communities and Christianity in the Holy Land and Jewish Christian relations in the special context of the Holy Land. In Israel, we have a new reality, and it's unique reality where Jews are the majority and Christian the minority. Now, I'm Jewish, and I grew up being part of a majority, but as Jews, we have a lot of experience of being minority. We've done that for 2,000 years. We still, around the world, Jews are minority. But here in the Holy Land, we're the majority. And there are different expectations and responsibilities being majority. And the Christians here, they have a long history as minority here in the Holy Land, but usually among Muslims. And here it's new reality for them as well. So what we're trying to do is to analyze the special challenges of Jewish Christian relations in this special context of the Holy Land. But then along the way, we talk a lot about what actually we as Israeli Jews know about Christians and Christianity. And part of my work is educating Israelis about the Christian communities in the Holy Land. So when we want to know about the population in Israel, Christians are part of it. Small, tiny parts, they are less than 2%, but still very meaningful part. Yeah, if you want to ask questions, so yes, please feel free.
Do you want to just do your whole thing with no interruption, or can I ask?
No, it's fine, and I will stop once in a while. I see someone else is joining, so
yes, Ruth Robbins is joining.
I think it's interesting.
How does it break down percentage-wise in Israel? How many percent of the people are Jewish? What percent are Christian? What percent are Muslim?
Hello, Ruth Robbins. Welcome.
Hi, Ruth.
So Ruth is joining us. We've just started, so you haven't missed anything. I'm Hannah, and I'm talking about Bethlehem today. And I was asking about the percentages of people from different background in Israel. So the official numbers, and in Israel, we are registered by religion. So in the ministry, you're registered what is your religious affiliation, unlike the US. So 75% of Israelis are Jewish. About 80% are Muslim Arabs, about 1.5% Arab Christians, and about 40,000, so it's a tiny number, Christians who are not Arabs, and about 4% of the population are not registered under any religion. These are usually people who came to Israel, made Aliyah, but they don't have a Jewish mother. So they will not be registered as Jews, but they came to Israel based on the law of return. So they're registered with no religion. So about almost 400,000 people in Israel have no religion. So it's 75 Jews, 18 Muslims, less than 2% Christians. Oh, I forgot, 2% Druze, which is another religion, Muslim. It's not Islam, but it's come from Shia Islam. and 4% with no religion.
Thank you.
How do the non-Muslim people who are not Jewish feel about living in Israel? Do they have the same difficulties?
So that's one of the things I will talk about later on in my presentation. I will talk about Bethlehem, which is not part of Israel, which is the West Bank, but there will be certain things that are relevant also to the Palestinian Christians in Israel. Right. So I will get to that later on in my presentation.
So Judith, I would suggest, because we do stop at different points, because some of these things would be coming into the discussion anyway. So we'll stop at a couple different points and open it up to questions. You might want to just make a note or even put it in the chat box if you're comfortable with that. And we can make sure that everything gets addressed.
Stop once in a while for questions as well. That will be fine. But I will relate to that later on in my presentation. So I want to talk today about Bethlehem. As I said earlier, I just visited Bethlehem after a couple of years since COVID. I avoided that because the situation was not stable with the COVID. Bethlehem is in the West Bank. It's an area that became under the Palestinian authorities. So it has different status than Israel. It's beyond the Green Line. After the Oslo Agreement in 1993, it became part of the Palestinian authorities. It's under the Palestinian authorities' responsibility. There's a Palestinian police there, although it's, I will share my presentation, and you will see how close it is to Jerusalem, but still it's quite far culturally and politically. So yeah, here's my presentation. And so here you see the entrance to the Basilica of the Nativity. And it was closed for 2 months in the beginning of March.
By Amazon Music. It's a polarizing world out there.
Sorry.
Okay. So it was closed during COVID for almost 3 months in 2020. And it's one of these churches, this one and the church in Jerusalem, that are opened 364 days a year. There's only one day when it's closed, but it's really open all year long. And to keep the place closed for 3 months, it was really devastating for locals. There were no tourists, of course. So in May 2020, when they reopened it again for pilgrims, but there were no pilgrims, it was very big event. And you can see that at the entrance, you have different kind of Christians. So you can see this priest dressed in brown gown, and he has a white robe. He's a Franciscan Catholic. This gentleman with a hat, with a triangular hat, he's Armenian Christian. These two, these are Greek Orthodox priests. He's also Greek Orthodox. They are Armenians. And these are people from the Palestinian authorities and from the Palestinian police. So they're responsible to maintain the security in the Church of Nativity, just like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I will explain what's the meaning of these churches in a second, which is in Jerusalem, is secured. It's not a Jewish place, but it's secured by the Israeli police. So this is a Christian place secured by the Palestinian police, which is usually Muslim. And in Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is secured by the Israeli police because it's in Jerusalem. So that's the entrance to the church that we're going to visit now together. And this is a map, and it shows the way between Jerusalem to Bethlehem. These cities are very, very close to each other. It's a little more than 1.5 miles. It's 2 hours walking, and you get from one city to the other. And for years, they were always connected. People used to walk from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. It was always clear that if you visit Jerusalem, you also visit Bethlehem. Because for Christians, the place where everything started is Bethlehem, and the place where everything ended is Jerusalem. So in Bethlehem, Jesus was born, and in Jerusalem, he was crucified and resurrected and ascended to heaven. So these cities were always very, very close. Now, because of the political situation, these cities are separated because Bethlehem is in the Palestinian authorities and Jerusalem is in Israel. And practically, these are almost like two countries. I mean, the Palestine is not a state yet, but they are separated, and there's not everyone can just cross from one city to the other. So it's quite interesting to see how the cities that used to be so connected are now not connected. So politics and religion are always mixed. And also in this sense that these two cities are now separated, it's not because theologically it should be separated. It's because politically they belong to two political entities. But in the past you could walk and still some people walk from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, especially on Christmas Eve, and they go to Bethlehem by foot. But on the way to Bethlehem from Jerusalem, we first stop at the tomb of Rachel. Rachel, the wife of Jacob, had only 2 sons, and she gave birth to her second son on the way to Ephrata, Bethlehem. And she died when she gave birth to her son Benjamin, and over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. So that's a place in Genesis 35. And this place is a very important place for Jews and for Christians, and also for Muslims. But Jews have managed to purchase the place already in the 19th century, Moshe Montefiore, and it became a Jewish place. It was visited by people from different religions, but since the 19th century, it's a Jewish place. And after 48, Jews didn't have access to the place because it was in Jordan, because the border separated Rachel's tomb from Israel. And after the war in 1967, it's again included in the territories of Israel. So today you can visit the tomb of Rachel. That's how it looks in the 19th century, but today it's in a building covered with walls around it, and you can see on the right, in the lower photo, the tomb of Rachel. Now, for Christians, the tomb of Rachel, the location of the tomb of Rachel is very important, because in the book of Jeremiah, the tomb of Rachel, or Rachel's, the tomb of Rachel is kind of hinted. Jeremiah usually talk about the destruction of the temple and how everything will collapse in this way. But he has one prophecy, which is more prophecy of consolation, and he talks about the people who are going to the exile. And on the way to exile, a voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because there are no more. But the next sentence, the next verse, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares the Lord. They will return from the land of the enemy. So it's a prophecy of consolation, because yes, she cries because they leave, but they will return. And this quote is also mentioned in the Christian scriptures, in the Gospels, in this context of the nativity of Jesus. So for Christians to go to Bethlehem, but to stop at Rachel's tomb and to think about Rachel mourning and crying for the people, it's also a reminder, yes, maybe now there are problems, now there's destruction, now it's time to mourn and to weep, but restrain your voice from weeping, because there is hope, there is salvation, there is a return to the land. So of course, Christians interpreted it in a different way, but they interpreted it as a prophecy of consolation as well, just as Jews do. And it's mentioned in the gospel, so Christian would stop at the Rachel tomb to visit on the way to Bethlehem. So here, the story of Rachel is also read as a prophecy of consolation, also by Christians. When we go to Bethlehem, we also remember the Moabite, Ruth. She was a woman of chesed, and she went to Bethlehem. And there's nothing new in what I'm saying. I mean, if you're familiar with the Tanakh, it's all Tanakh. She goes to Bethlehem, and she meets there with Boaz, and then they got married, and they have a child, and then the great grandson would be King David. And it's a fascinating story because she's a Moabite. She's, you're not supposed to marry Moabite for many generations, but here we see that Boaz from the family of Yehuda actually marry a Moabite woman. And again, for Christians, it's very important to remember that, because in Christianity, the message of God for Christian went to all humanity, not only for Jews. And these are little hints in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, that God does not care only for Jews, but actually his message goes beyond the Jewish people. So the story of going to Bethlehem, looking at the field of wheat, yeah, because from wheat you make the lechem. Lechem means bread. And thinking about the Moabite woman, who was actually the great-grandmother of King David, is quite exciting for Christians and also for Jews, of course. And when we get to Bethlehem, we're immediately being remembered of who comes from Bethlehem, and that's King David. So when Samuel the prophet, after he was disappointed by Shaul, he went to look for someone else. God sent him to look for someone to lead the people. And he gets to the house of Jesse, and he told him, well, show me, who are your sons? I want to choose one of them. I mean, God asked me to choose one of them to be the leader. And they're still, and Jesse come and, pass one boy after the other, and Samuel is not impressed. And then Jesse said, well, there's still the youngest. He's tending the sheep. I mean, he's now with the sheep. He's not around. I don't think that's the one you're looking for. And Samuel says, send for him. He will not sit down until he arrives. I will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him and had him brought in. And he was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. This is a nice description of a young man. Then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. And they were all very surprised because, Jesse had many boys who were talented and impressive, but he chooses the youngest one who was outside with the sheep. But this resonance, or this connected to a prophecy that appears in the book of Micha. It's one of the prophets in the 12 little prophets in the Bible that says, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, for you are small amongst the clans of Judah. Out of you will come for me one who will be the ruler over Israel, whose origin are from ancient time. So don't expect that the leader would be someone from a wealthy, important family, the oldest, the most mature one, the most experienced one. Sometimes the ruler can come from the youngest, from someone who is small, someone who is not very famous, someone who is not very dominant. You never know. And this is the prophecy of Micha, but I think it's a message for life. And that's, when I think about Christmas, and I'm Jewish, so it's not my holiday, but I always try to look for messages that I can learn from other religions. And I think this is one of the big messages of Christmas for Christians who really celebrate Christmas and not just buying gifts and having Christmas tree, that you never know what's the potential of every person, because sometimes you have someone who grew up in a very bad family, didn't have the opportunity to have good education, didn't have the wealth to enjoy life, but you never know what will come out of him. So don't underestimate anyone and search for the potential in everyone. And I think this is the story of Christmas for Christians, because we will talk about what happened in Bethlehem, and Jesus, who is the savior for Christians, was not born, he didn't come from a very famous, important family, and he wasn't born in an expensive hospital, and there were a lot of maids taking care of him in his childhood. He came from a simple family, from a woman that no one knows much about her. He was born he was placed in a manger. He was born in a cave around the animals. I mean, no one would expect anything from such a boy, but see what happened at the end. So again, it's the same with David. He was small, he was handsome, he was taking care of the sheep, he was the youngest, but then see what came out of King David. So the prophecy of Micha also talks about the future and also says, well, not just King David, but also in the future, you don't know who's going to be the ruler. The ruler would come from among the youngest, from the smallest clan, from the youngest in the family. And also there's one sentence at the end, which would be very, very important for Christians. Someone whose origin are from the of old, from ancient times. And for Christian, this word would be very meaningful because they would say, yes, Jesus, who is from a small clan, from a small family, from not very famous family, who was born in a very simple place, his origin are from old, from ancient times, because according to the Christian belief, Jesus is God. He's the incarnated God. Therefore, he's ancient. He was there before creation. So it's kind of a hint to the fact that Christian would read it as talking, as if Micha the prophet talking about Jesus being the incarnated God. So if there are questions or remarks up to here before we moving toward the sites, we will. So then let's go on and visit the place. So for Christians, after coming to Bethlehem, they would like to visit the Church of Nativity. So the Church of Nativity was built over the site. It's believed to be the place where Jesus was born. And according to the Gospels, according to the Christian scriptures, Mary was conceived with a son, not from her husband Joseph, but from the Holy Spirit. And according to the Gospels, she was 9 months pregnant when they came to Bethlehem. And they came for census to Bethlehem. The Romans wanted to count exactly how many people live in each place. They liked to have order. And although they maybe, according to the Gospel of Luke, lived in the Galilee, they came to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, actually, to the place where the family of Joseph are originally from. They're from the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah is located south to Jerusalem, and they went there for the census. And it was so crowded in Bethlehem in those days that they didn't have a place in a hotel. So they had to stay in a shepherd's cave or something like that. And that's where Mary gave birth to Jesus. So as I said, this is one of the main things for me. I would take that from the story of the Nativities, that, you know, he wasn't born in a fancy place, in a fancy house. He was born in a cave. And as I said, this potential that you have to find in every person. Of course, for Christians, it's a very happy occasion because he's the savior, and that's the beginning of the salvation, the moment he was born. And therefore, the second church that was built in the Holy Land was the Church of Nativity. It was built in the 4th century over the site that believed to be the place where he was born. That's the courtyard in front of the church. It's a very old church, actually the oldest one in the Holy Land. We're going to explore it together. We get closer to the door and you really have to bow in order to enter. It's called the door of humility because you kind of feel very simple and small when you go below the entrance, but actually it's for practical reason. Originally, this was the door, the big one. But then in the 12th century, they made a lower door, which you can see here. And then in the 15th century, they make even smaller door, so the Muslim will not be able to enter with the horses. And that's how you enter today. And that's me today, this morning, in the church. And you enter the church, and this is the church. This is the Church of Nativity. It was built by Constantine, who was the emperor in the 4th century. Actually, until his time, Christians were persecuted by Romans. He was the one who decided to stop persecuting Christians and to give them the freedom to follow their faith. And he was the one who gave the order to build the church over the site where Jesus, it believed to be the place where Jesus was born. He was the one who also gave the order to build the church over the site where Jesus was crucified and buried and resurrected, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is in the center of Jerusalem. In the Gospel, it says that Jesus was born in Bethlehem because he is the Messiah, and the Messiah is coming from the family of King David. So if King David was born in Bethlehem and he comes from Bethlehem, therefore the Messiah should come from Bethlehem, and therefore Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So this connection between King David and Jesus is very strong and very tight along the whole story of the gospel. So he was born where King David was born, and he came to the world in the place where King David was anointed as a king. And the church that was built there in the 4th century was covered with beautiful mosaics. Now, I don't know if you can see how beautiful it is. It really depends on the resolution of the screen, but it was all covered with tiny mosaic with tiny little stones. And actually, the mosaic was covered for many, many years. No one knew that there's such a beautiful mosaic. And only about 100 years ago, they excavated. See the ground level today? And this is the ground level in the time of Constantine. So they actually had to carve almost 70 centimeters below the ground level in order to find this original mosaic, which today you can see only a small part of it. It's all covered to protect it. So that's what Constantine built. But the church was demolished. There were Samaritans who had fights with the Christians, and they destroyed the church. So the Christians rebuilt it in the 6th century. And that's the church we actually see today. So the church we see today is not 1700 years old, but it's only 1,500 years old, so 1,500 years old, which is amazing because you don't have such old buildings in Jerusalem. You have remnants of buildings, but not something like that standing. And that's how it looks today. So that's the picture I took today. It was lately cleaned, and that was really exciting for me to see how the columns are clean, and you can actually see the painting and the mosaic, which we're going to see soon. And that's how it looked before the renovation. So you can see how the columns are very, very dark from years of use and people touch it and candles. And so now they cleaned everything and it looks very, very nice. And that's how it looked in the past. I just love this photo from the 1930s. You can see how it looks the same, but at the same time, there's something different about it. And they still haven't discovered all the old floor. We will enter the church and we're gonna walk and we're gonna go under the church. That's the interesting part for Christians here. On the way out, we will pass an icon. An icon is not just a painting. An icon is considered to be a religious item. If I would compare it, it's not just something you see. It's not art that you look at it and you say, oh, that's a nice image of Mary. But for Christians, an icon, it has a liturgical use. If I would compare it in Judaism, I would compare it to a Torah scroll. Torah scroll is not just the text that is written on the scroll, but it's the item, the scroll, the parchment, the me'il, the cover. It all has its really sanctity. The material has the sanctity. The same with the icon for Christians. It's not what you see there. It's even the material has sacredness. So people come and kiss it. They touch it. They leave all kind of jewelries on the icon. If they ask Mary for something like to be healed and they were healed, they leave a present and they hanged it on the icon. And this icon is very special. It's called the icon of Bethlehem because Mary smiles. She never smiles in the icon. She always has a very serious face. And this is the only place in the world where she smiles. So it's very famous and people love it and come it and kiss it. And then from there, we're going to go down because in holy places, the holy place is usually underground. It's beneath the church. So we're going down now, and that's what we're going to do literally. So we're going to go down, and you go down the stairs under the church. It's all covered with nice fabric, stitched with gold. And that's the cave, that's the grotto beneath the church. And that's the place of nativity. That's a place that marked the place of nativity. And it's absolutely amazing to see the place totally empty because 2 years ago, it was packed with people. You couldn't move there. And today we were the only one there. So that's the place of nativity, and you can see the emotion that it brings to people to be there in the place where Jesus was born. And they go down to the site of nativity and they kiss the stone. And it's interesting, the interest of people to touch the holiness. So when you see a holy place, it's not enough for you just to see the place, but you want to touch it. You want to hug it. It's like when you see a family relative or someone you love, it's not enough just to see him, to say, hi, good to see you. You know, when I see my son, I hug him, I touch him, I want to kiss him. It's the same with holy places. You want to touch it. So people go there and they touch it and they kiss the stone and they kiss the place of nativity, which is very important for them. And then on the other side, there's a place where it's the manger when they it's believed to be the place where they placed the little baby Jesus after she gave birth to him. Now, it's a place where you feed the animal. So it's like a wooden box, where you had some, food for the animal, and that's where they placed the baby. And again, I think it's very meaningful story for Christian. Like, this is the place, the Savior came from the manger, not from a very important place. And as I said, people want to have contact with holiness. So in the Christian tradition, especially in the Catholic and the Orthodox, there's a great meaning for relics. If you have a little piece of relic of the material of the holy place, it's very good. And actually, they got a piece of the crib, the piece of the manger, when they kept Jesus in the first few hours. It was in Rome for many, many years, and it was brought back to Bethlehem in 2019, just before COVID. And it was like a great excitement in Bethlehem. People all came to kiss it and to touch it. And until today, it's presented in the church. You can see the little piece of wood over here. And people go there and pray there and go and kiss it. Again, to have this physical contact with holiness. Now, if I compare it to Judaism, being Israeli, I have only Israeli examples. But when you go to the Wailing Wall, I mean, it's not enough just to stand in front of the wall. You want to touch the wall. You want to kiss it. You want to leave a note with, although God hears your prayers, even if you pray somewhere else, but to be there and to leave something there and to have a physical contact with holiness is something which is very important for people from all religions. So it's always interesting to see that happening in other religions as well. I will jump a little bit, and I will go back to the church. The church was renovated by the Crusaders. So the Crusaders were Catholic Europeans who came from Europe to rescue the Holy Land from the Muslim. That was 1,000 years ago. They were afraid that they would not have access to the holy places. The local Christian asked for their help, and they came to the Holy Land. They occupied the Holy Land from the Muslims, and they had a big kingdom in Jerusalem only for 88 years, in the rest of the country for 200 years. But during the time they ruled the Holy Land, they built many buildings. Now, they were European, so they came with a European state of mind and European style and European architecture. They came from Europe, and they renovated the church, and they renovated in their style, but they didn't have craftsmen. So they took craftsmen from among the locals, and we have a combination of East and West art. And what they did was covering all the church with mosaics. Now, I don't know if you've seen the image on the left. It looks like painting. It's not. It's made of tiny little pieces of stone. And these mosaics with a lot of vegetables and leaves and flowers and some inscriptions in Latin and Greek and saints. Here you can see, again, it looks like painting, but it's not. It's mosaic, and it's almost 1,000 years old. And you see here Jesus, and after he was resurrected, one of his disciples, Thomas, he didn't believe that it's actually Jesus. He hesitated, said, "Oh, well, I don't think you are Jesus and you were resurrected." So Jesus showed him his wounds and told him, "If you don't believe me, just touch the wounds, put your finger in my wound and you will see it's me. And Thomas did that, and he put a finger and touched the wounds of Jesus. So that's what you see in the image here. And this is, again, almost 1,000 years old. It's a mosaic that was made by Catholic Christians who were here 1,000 years ago and made and covered the whole church with mosaics. So this was lately renovated, and it's very impressive. And here you see it's under the renovation. They cleaned one piece of stone after the other. Some of the stones are not stones. It's just covered with color or with glass. Like these are all golden leaf. So it's real gold, but it's very thin gold. And they have colored stones here. But it's all mosaic. This is Jesus, this mosaic depicting Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday when he comes to Jerusalem a week before he was crucified. You could see the donkey. Even a donkey has an expression. It's quite amazing, I think, to do something like this in mosaic. I mean, paint it, one thing, but to make it with little stones, it's absolutely amazing. So there's a lot of expression in this mosaic. And one of the interesting things that they just did renovation. So the church, I was very excited to be there today because they completed the renovation of the church after, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even more. And while they renovated the church, they found another angel. So originally there were angels covering the walls, and they didn't know about this angel because it was covered with plaster. And then they found this angel that was always there but covered with plaster. And the headlines in the news were, a new angel was discovered in Bethlehem. So it's interesting. So again, it's all made of mosaic, and all the background is all covered with, every stone is covered with gold leaf, which is very, very impressive. We're gonna leave the main church toward another nearby church. Now, if it looks very European to you, that's what it is. It's also part of the Crusader heritage. So the European Crusaders who came almost 1,000 years ago built a cloister. Cloister is a rectangular or square plaza surrounded with portico, with a corridor that has ceiling, and then surrounded with columns like what you see here. And this is a better photo. So it feels really like you're in Europe, but it's in Bethlehem. And it was renovated and reconstructed. So you really feel like you're in a European monastery, but it's actually Europeans who built it in the Levant, in the Holy Land. So that's the courtyard of the church. And then you can also visit the church that is dedicated to St. Catherine, which is a nearby church to the Church of Nativity. It's a modern one from the 19th century. Now, what's unique about the church and unique about the Holy Land, that in the church itself is divided between few different Christian denominations. So the church, as you can see, the main part of the church belongs to the Greek Orthodox Church, which is one denomination. St. Catherine, the cloister, belonged to another church, another denomination, the Catholic. There's some area for Armenian Christians. They have their monastery here. And there are some areas like the tomb, the place where Jesus was born, that belong to, it's shared by few communities together. Now, to explain you how strange and unexpected it is. So for the Holy Land, it's very unusual. I mean, we have similar cases in other churches, but it's not because the Christian like to share. It's because they have no other choice. The historical circumstances led them to, or forced them to share the church. So they don't like it, but they don't have any other choice. And they have to be there together. Each one has its own area where they can pray. And they have to find a way to be there together. If I want to compare it, I will not compare it to Jewish places. It's too complicated, but it's very unique. You will not find something like that Orthodox and Catholic sharing churches. You can find Methodist and Presbyterian or Baptist and I don't know, Episcopalian, but Orthodox and Catholic, usually they don't share churches. Definitely not in holy places, but here they have no other choice. They're kind of stuck here together, and There's no other way to divide the church. So they're sharing it together. And then Christmas is coming. So there will be Christmas celebration there, but not only one Christmas, but here we have 3 Christmases. So if you think that in the US, you have Hanukkah and Christmas, so everyone can celebrate 2 holidays of 2 different religions. Here, just the Christians have 3 Christmases in 3 different dates. And there are different reasons for that. Some just technical, some theological, but all the Catholic and Protestant Christian would celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December, just like the Christians in the US. But, so here you see the Catholics celebrating Christmas on the 25th. But some churches, like the Greek Orthodox, would celebrate 13 days later because they follow an old calendar, which is 13 days behind our calendar. So today, it's not the 14th of December. In their calendar today, it's only the 1st of December. So everything is 13 days later. So they will celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. So if you have friends in Russia, there they also celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. In some other Eastern European countries, they celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January, and also the Orthodox here. So it's not a lot of people in the Holy Land. We're talking about, I don't know, in the Holy Land, including the West Bank and Israel, I don't know, maybe 80, 90,000 people, but they would celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. So we have for the Christians, they have a long vacation in school because they have to include all the Christmases. So this is the Orthodox Christmas, and the Coptic, which is the Egyptian Christian, and the Syriac, which are the Christians from Syria area who speak Aramaic, they would also celebrate on the same day. But as I said, we have 3 Christmases, and that's the Armenian. The Armenian, for theological reasons, celebrate Christmas on the 19th of January. So we have 25th, we have 7th of January, and we have the 19th of January. Now, most of the Christians, especially the Armenian, they would celebrate all 3 Christmases, and they would bring gifts 3 times, and they would keep the tree from the beginning of December until the end of January. There are some Christmas shops in Jerusalem. They would sell Christmas gifts and Christmas decoration from the beginning of December until the end of January. The Christmas trees would be left on until the end of January. So there's a Christmas atmosphere. There's some vacation in school, and the Christians celebrate for almost 2 months, the Christmas season. And unlike in the US, you get the long vacation here. So a few days before Christmas, few days after Christmas, you cannot talk to anyone. Everyone is on vacation. And so these are the Armenians celebrating in the Church of Nativity, and you can recognize them by their hats. They have a triangular hat. And then if you go outside, you will see the celebration. So the celebration, this is the Manger Square outside the church. And you can see the celebration in front of the church. But just in the same square of Nativity, facing the church, you have a mosque, which is an old mosque of Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a city where only 30% of the population are Christians today, and 30% Christians and 70% Muslim. So there are many more Muslim in Bethlehem than Christian. It wasn't like that in the past, but that's the situation now. Many Christians leave the Holy Land, Israel and the Palestinian authorities for different reasons: political reasons, security, economical reasons, tension, religious tensions. Some would say with Jews, some would say with Muslims. Definitely, it's not easy to be a minority within a minority. So there's a mosque just facing the Church of Nativity, and on Friday, people go to pray in the mosque. On Sunday, they go to pray in the church. The Christians go to pray in the church. And who's going to pray in the church? Who's coming to church? So there's a description which a Christian really like to use, and that's the living stones. Actually, in Christianity, you're not supposed to have holy places. There's no holy place. God is everywhere. I mean, I can identify with that as a Jew. God is everywhere. And I'm not sure if we actually also in Judaism need holy places, definitely if there's no temple. But people they always need the holy places. But what the Christian Bible says, well, there is no need for a holy place because the community is the temple. The community is the living stones. Actually, you build a community, or you build a spiritual house with the people. And I think it's a very good example also if you talk about Jewish communities in other countries. In Israel, again, I think it's different. That what builds the community is not the JCC and not the buildings and not the synagogue. It's the people. If you don't have people, you don't have a community. And I always think about it when I travel to Europe and I visit cities where there are no Jews there. It's just the buildings that were left, the cemetery and the synagogue was turned to a museum. And I think it's so sad that no one actually comes and pray in this synagogue anymore. It's just a museum. And that's exactly what the Christians say about the Holy Land. There is still a small community, but they say, we are the living stones. Without us, the Christians say, these holy places would turn to a museum. It would be very sad just to see the stones, because the living stones, that's what make the place meaningful. That's what makes the place alive. So they talk a lot about themselves as living stones. And who are these Christians who live in the Holy Land? So we have to remember that when we talk about the Christians, and here I'm talking about the Holy Land, not just the state of Israel. Holy Land means Israel and the West Bank and the Palestinian territories. Most of them, they're Arabs. They speak Arabic. This is their mother tongue. That's the language they speak among themselves. That's the language they pray. And it doesn't matter to which denomination they belong. They can be Baptist, they can be Methodist, they can be Catholic, they can be Orthodox, they can be Lutheran. They speak Arabic. They part of the Arab culture. They're part of the Arab people. And most of them in Israel and all, definitely in the West Bank, would consider themselves part of the Palestinian nation. So they are part of the Arabs because they speak Arabic, they're part of the Arab culture, but their nationality is Palestinian. They could be citizen of Israel, they could live in the West Bank, but they're part of this group. Since when do we have Christians who speak Arabic? Well, actually, from the 7th century, so 1300 years, since Arabs came from the Arab Peninsula, from the Saudi Arabia, and took over all the Middle East, everyone started to speak Arabic here in the Middle East. Jews, Christian, and Muslims. Jews who lived in Iraq, Jews who lived in Syria, they spoke Arabic. Jews who lived here in the Holy Land, they spoke Ladino, Arabic, Yiddish. Jews who lived in Morocco spoke Arabic. Jews who lived in Egypt spoke Arabic. So there were Arab Jews. The same with Christians. There were Christians in the Middle East who spoke different languages, and for the last 1300 years, they speak Arabic. So if they live in Egypt, they're Arab Christian, Arab Egyptian Christian. If they live in Syria, they're Arab Syrian Christian. If they live in Iraq, they're Arab Iraqi Christians. And also the Palestinian Christians. They are Palestinian, they are Arabs, and they're part of the local church. So here you see the bishop of Jerusalem, who dressed in pink, like all the bishops in the Catholic Church, with girl dressed in Palestinian dress. When you go to the church today, this is also nice, and I'll show that in a second. When you go to the church today, you don't only see Palestinian Arab Christians, but you also see other Christians. So you asked Judith about other Christians who are not Arabs. So there are Russian Christians who live in Israel, many Russian Christians, people who came from Russia, and they're Christians. There are Christians from Armenia. They're not Arabs, but they are Armenians. There are some, if someone get married with a Christian, I don't know, from South America or something, and he lives in Israel, he's also a Christian. So most of the Christians are Arabs, but not all of them. There are also other Christians who are not Arabs. So majority of the Arabs are Muslim, but as I said, a small minority are Arab Christians, and they're very proud of the Arab culture. As you can see, they wear the traditional custom from their Palestinian villages in Bethlehem. And one of the most festive parts of the holiday is the Scouts. Now I will share it again. Just a second. I will share it with the sound. So just before Christmas, the day before Christmas, all the scouts of the Holy Land get together to Bethlehem, and they perform with their traditional scouts musical instrument, which are quite surprising because it's not typical to the Holy Land, like the bagpipes. So, where's the video? No, yeah, here it is. There we go. I hope you can hear. We'll jump a little bit. Oh, sorry. Hope you can hear the drum. This is another group of scouts, and you see these are not just kids, we're talking about adults participate and play the bagpipes. This is definitely not a typical musical instrument to the Holy Land. We inherited from England. It's got bass. Another group. And that goes on and on like this, the whole afternoon until the prayer, until the procession and the prayer start. I just can't see you, so let me. Why I cannot? Oh, here it is. Sorry, I have to open something here for some reason. Yeah, okay. So that's what happened. And maybe the last thing in my presentation would be a short drive to a nearby village called the Shepherd's Field. Oh, there's a spelling mistake. The Shepherd's Field, which is not far from Bethlehem. And that's the place that believes to be a place where the shepherds used to be, walk outside the city and take their sheep. And when the shepherds, angels appeared to the shepherd and told them, go and look for a child that was born in Bethlehem. And the scholars, some scholars, Christian scholars, tend to connect the place with the tower of a flock, or Migdal Eder, a place that is mentioned in the book of Genesis. Actually, it's mentioned twice in the Bible. Migdal Eder. It says that after Jacob left the tomb of Rachel, he moved on toward Alone Mamre, and he pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. And according to Jewish scripture, Migdal Eder was a place, it's kind of a tower where the shepherds could look around and find the sheep. And it was somewhere between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. So scholars suggested that the place Migdal Eder is actually the place where the shepherds were when they found, when the angel appeared to them and told them to go and look for Jesus in Bethlehem. So when people come and visit Bethlehem, and I think I will just, then I'll be able to see you. So when people come to Bethlehem this time of the year, when Christians come from all over the world, what they see is not just, they come to visit the place of Nativity where Jesus was born, but they always think in the back of their mind about what the book of Samuel said about King David and what the prophet Micha was saying about the ruler to come. And sometimes it's hard, to think about how things looked like 2,000 years ago, because there was no big church and fancy building over there, but it was just a cave of the shepherd. And but at the same time, when people go and visit these places, they also see people. They also see the people who live there. They also see the monks and the priests who serve there. They also see the local communities. And I think this is one of the main things visiting holy places and definitely visiting the Holy Land. It's not just to be reminded of what happened in those places, but it's also to have opportunity to see what's happening now in these places. And I think it's also true for being in Jerusalem and visiting Jewish places. It's also true for going to any place around the world, not just to see the stones, not just to think about the past, but also to think about the present. And I think this time in the last 2 years, when we didn't have any tourists, and as you've heard from Elise, there are no tourists, so you have to shift, from guiding people in the Holy Land to bring the Holy Land to their computer. But we feel how these pilgrims, these visitors, Jews, Christians, Muslims, are part of these holy places, part of the city. When they're not here, we feel that something is missing. It's we, the local people who live here, and you feel that it's empty. And I hope this emptiness will be filled with people who will come in the future. And I hope that when they will come, again, they would notice that there are the walls, but there are also a lot of people who are waiting for them to receive them in the holy places. So I hope I answered some of your questions, Judy. And if you have more questions, I'll be happy to hear. Or Lisa, if you have any remarks.
No, this was fascinating, Hannah. It was really, I guess the only thing I wanted to ask you about is, you didn't put it in there, but I just thought it would be a curious detail to add. Because you talked so much about the Christians in Bethlehem, but they are a very, very small minority. My understanding is that in the Palestinian territories, there are about 10 communities that by law have to have a Christian mayor.
Right.
In order to keep the, yeah.
Right. So Palestinian in the West Bank, the Palestinian authorities were established by secular national, the PLO is a secular organization. So they have special rules for Christians. So a city like Bethlehem has to have a Christian mayor. Traditionally, there are other places that used to have and still have Christian mayors. Although Christian is a tiny, small minority, it's being shrinked the whole time. So yeah, and they have a minister that's responsible for Christians, and they have a quota for Christians in the Palestinian parliament. Now, this is true for the Palestinian authorities now. Who knows what's going to happen, because Palestinian society is getting more religious, and Hamas, which is not a secular movement, but it's a national religious movement, becoming more powerful in many places. So there's always fear. But at the same time, we have to remember that Muslim and Christian live there for centuries together. So they're trying to work it out, but it's not easy because there are different communities. So there are about 60,000 Palestinian Christians in the West Bank, adding to the 175 Christians in Israel. So it's a very small community in general. They are very small in the West Bank and in Israel.
Thank you. Ruth, either Ruth have another question before we end?
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Hannah, for expanding my sense of Christianity and bringing all this. Well, Brookdale, I can't find the words to thank you. And you, Elisa, I just saw Mom a few minutes ago. And yes, so it's special. And the whole of just being the virtual, I mean, you have brought Israel back, or I'm totally inarticulate. I can't even, I am so moved by your presentation, and thank you for being there. And
very much for nice words.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Just wonderful. Thank you. I'd love to come back. and travel.
Oh, we hope one day you'll be able to do that, Ruth.
I
And,
hope so.
and in the meantime, can't tell you, thrilled to always have you join. And now, Judith, also, obviously, I hope you like this program. And Hannah, thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure to bring you in and have you speak with our communities. So I want to take this opportunity to wish you both lots of good health. And I know we just finished Hanukkah, but I hope the holiday brought a lot of light into your lives. And I want to wish you all the best as we step into 2022 and hopefully, soon leave this undesirable, virus behind us and move on to better times and more tourists. So thank you all. And I'm going to
have a nice
Thank
day.
you, Hannah.
All right.
Thank you,
I'm gonna
Lisa.
turn this off. Bye.
Right.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Great picture. Thank you. Thank you.